Remember, Islam is based on three things: the book, the man, and the place, the Quran, Muhammad, and Mecca. Mecca is foundational. If you start to confront Mecca and it starts to wobble and then you're going to shut it down, the other two come flying with it. It is important for Muslims because they believe that it is the earliest and most important city in the history of mankind. When Adam and Eve are thrown out of the Garden of Eden, it's way up in space, they're thrown down to Mecca. Therefore, it had to be the oldest city in the existence of mankind. You don't get a city or a habitant earlier than Adam and Eve, because they're the first humans. So therefore, it's the oldest city in the world. Yet references to Mecca in the Quran and tradition do not hold up historically. Notice, it's not near Sodom and Gomorrah, though the Quran says it is. It's not where Abraham lived, though the Quran says it is. It's not where Ishmael and Hagar lived, though the Quran says it is. So you can see there's a real problem here.
You know, I've spent my career taking on some of the cultural baddies, you know, some of the most prominent intellectuals in the world, some of them in public debate, some of them behind the scenes. And I've come to realize that ideas define everything that we do. With an academic degree, you're trained to be a researcher and writer to the point that it's annoying. I mean, but I'm grateful for it. I'm not talking about books I've not read. I'm not talking about papers I've not read. Whether I agree with them or not actually isn't the point. There are quite a few books that I would read that I would say are actually evil books. Donald Trump, when he was in a divorce with his first wife, she said he has a copy of Mein Kampf next to his bed. I wish more people did. If the German people had bothered to read that book rather than just have it on their shelf, we might have avoided the Holocaust. If more people read the Quran, they'd be wiser to what Islam actually is, what they actually believe. If people bothered to read, as I have, the writings of Klaus Schwab and the various contributors to the World Economic Forum and the ideas that are driving the globalists, I read them because I want to understand their mentality. I cut out the middleman. I go straight to the ideology. Everything in your life is being defined by either your ideas or the ideas of the people around you. And each episode, we're going to be digging into a different idea that appears in the culture. This is Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton.
Welcome to another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton. I'm delighted to have with me on the show today Dr. Jay Smith, who is an Islamicist. Now, do not use that with being a Muslim. He is not a Muslim, definitely not a Muslim. He is a Christian who specializes in taking on Muslims through polemics. And we make a little bit of a distinction between polemics here and apologetics. Apologetics is defending the Christian faith, which Jay does, but is being a polemicist, he's moving out, he's taking the offensive. And Jay has some really startling stuff to share with us on this episode of Ideas Have Consequences. Let me say this, Jay is a dear friend, brother in Christ, and he's like a big brother to me. Jay and I love to argue with each other. That's our way of showing affection, I think, for each other. We've also argued with Muslims. So I've been with him down to Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park in London, where Jay worked for 25 years taking on radical Muslims. And it's really incredible stuff that he does. Jay, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be on the show again with you.
Well, it really is. And you've been telling me in our private phone conversations, you've been telling me a lot about this information that you have. And you've been working on this for quite a while. First, set this up for us. What is it that we're going to see today?
Yeah, we're going to ask some questions concerning the origins of Islam, how Islam came to being, only looking at sources, evidence from the 7th century, the century where it supposedly existed, or where Muhammad lived and where he received the Quran, and where the city that he lived in. We're going to confront those three things. And this is something that we've been working on. There's a whole team of us, just not myself. I'm probably the one who is the communicator to get it out into the whole world. We've been working on this since 1995, so almost 30 years now. And because of that, we're finding that everybody around the world wants this material because it's so easy to use. It's all visual. So I'll be using a PowerPoint today to just walk you through it. You'll see visually just how easy it is. And we're going to confront four things: the sources of Islam, then we're going to confront the city of Islam, Mecca, then we're going to confront the man of Islam, that is Muhammad, and then we're going to end with the book of Islam, the Quran.
Very good. Well, we've never done anything quite like this on Ideas Have Consequences, so a PowerPoint it is, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. So why don't you go ahead and get started?
Okay, so here it is. This is the PowerPoint. The truth about Islam's origins. That's what we're looking at. We want to see how Islam began. And this is the newest research on the historical problems. Much of the material I'm going to be sharing with you today comes from Germany and other parts of Europe, but primarily from Germany. And it's the German scholars who are way ahead of the rest of the world. They're feeding it to us, and I'm going to be taking and reusing it and then explaining it as we go along. So why are we doing this historical critique? What does it value? Well, it confronts the very foundations of Islam, the book and the man, the book being the Quran, the man Muhammad. It's neutral. Anybody could use it. You can see you don't have to be a Christian or any atheist or a humanist. It is politically correct. It does not attack Muslims. I'm not going to say anything against Muslims. There's no hate speech in what I'm going to use today. I'm not going to attack Muhammad. I'm not going to attack the Quran. It's therefore not Islamophobic. It is easy to communicate. It's so visual. You'll see that as you watch the PowerPoint. Just keep looking at the PowerPoint. And we, as Christians, are the only ones that have the best and only antidote, the only answer, and the only alternative to what I'm going to be introducing today. I will be going through four areas. I'll be starting with the problems with the sources, moving to the problem with Mecca, then going on to the problem with Muhammad, and ending with the problem of the Quran, looking at the origins of all four. So, what are the claims that the Muslims make for their standard Islamic narrative? These are the Islamic traditions. It doesn't matter whether they are radical, nominal, possibly not the liberals, but these are the claims they make. They claim that for the last 1,400 years, Muhammad was the last and greatest prophet who was born in Mecca in 570 and died in 632. He, therefore, is the model for Islam, the paradigm for all of Islam, but also for the world. And he received the Quran as the final revelation for the world. Now, that Quran he received in a 22-year period between 610 and 632. This is their claim, not my claim. That Quran, they say, is the greatest and the only perfectly preserved book, the final revelation, and it corrects all previous revelations. Therefore, Islam, as the final religion, is based on Muhammad's life and sayings, that's known as the Sunnah, and on the Quran's teachings. That's what they claim. The conclusion, really, is three things. Islam is completely dependent on three things: the book, the man, and the place. The book, the Quran, the man, Muhammad, the place, Mecca. Since these three areas are foundational to Islam, why don't we investigate them? But hold on. Let's not investigate them from what the Muslims have been saying from their period. Let's investigate them from the time period that these three things take place, where they all existed in the 7th century. And in the place where they all are, that is the Hijaz, a central western part of Arabia. Let's start by looking at the problems of sources, and then we'll move to Mecca. Now, here's the problem of sources. Where did all these stories about Muhammad, about the Quran, about all the reference of how Islam began, where did it all come from? Well, let's look at this map. Here's what the Muslims have been telling us. According to the standard Islamic narrative, according to the traditions, according to every Muslim today, Muhammad's empire included that brown area there. Do you see that brown area? There's Mecca, Medina. That's the western, central, and southern part of what is today Saudi Arabia. But back then, it was just Arabia. That's where it all took place up until 632. Once Muhammad died in 632, then you have Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, and they expand the borders to the Orange area, all the way from Tripoli in the west to Afghanistan in the east, from Turkey in the north down to the Hadramaut, what is today Yemen and Oman in the south. That's the area that we're mostly interested in this talk. This is called the Rashidun period. After the Rashidun period in 661, Ali was killed at the Battle of Siffin. Muawiyah takes over, the Umayyads take over, and they expand the area to the purple area. They last for about 90 to 100 years. That's the purple area from Spain in the west all the way to Kabul in the east. That's it, folks. Now, I'm not interested in the purple area today. What I want interested in is the orange and the brown area. Put that in your mind. Remember that. I'm going to keep coming back to that area. Let's go right into it then. So this is what they say. This is the timeline of how Islam, this is their story, not my story. They say Muhammad was born in 570. They say that the Quran was revealed in 610. They say that Muhammad suddenly wakes up in the middle of the night in 621, was put on the back of a winged horse. He flies up to Jerusalem, and he goes up 7 heavens up to meet Allah, who tells him to pray 50 times a day. He comes back to the 5th heaven. meets Moses. Moses, that's way too many. So he bounces back between the seventh and the fifth heaven and brings it down to 5 prayers. Then he returns down to Jerusalem, gets back on the winged horse, and flies back to Mecca. That happens in 621. It's known as the Mi'raj. He then moves from Mecca and takes over Medina in 622. Just walks in and takes it over. That's known as the Hijrah. And then he comes back to Mecca and takes over Mecca in 630. 2 years later, he then dies, like most people. We all die. So that's his life. That's his story. After he comes Abu Bakr. He then lasts only 2 years before he dies. After him comes Umar. He only lasts 10 years. He is killed in 644. Uthman then takes power. He lasts 12 years. And while he's in power, the Quran is compiled in its final form, 652. That's their story. And then after he is killed in 656, Ali lasts for 5 years, and then he is killed. So what do we know? Islam was fully formed in the Hijaz, that's the central part of Arabia, by 661. Are you getting that? That's all you need to know for now. But here's the question. How do we know any of this above? Where does all these stories? I'm just giving you bare skeleton of the origins of Islam. There's much more that I could give you. I don't have the time. Let's go and see where it all comes from. To do that, we need to put another timeline on. So there is Muhammad's death. His biography must be written down by this time. That's called the sira, the biography of Muhammad. Is it? No. According to Islamic tradition, the first biography of Muhammad is written by this guy, 765. Do you see a problem here, folks? That's 130 years later. But we don't have anything written by Ibn Ishaq, not one word. We have to go to this guy, Ibn Hisham, who dies in 833. That's 200 years later that we finally get the biography of this guy written down. Others who wrote a biography is Al-Waqidi. He dies in 835. Now, that's not the only genre. Most Muslims go to what we know as, we're getting rid of Ibn Ishaq because he doesn't really care because we don't have one thing written by him. We do have another genre known as the hadith. That's the sayings of Muhammad, much greater and much bigger than the sira. And the sayings are much more prolific, but look who first writes them down. This guy here, Al-Bukhari, he died in 870. Then you come Sahih Muslim, 875. At-Tirmidhi, 884. Al-Majah, 887. Ab-Dawud, 899. Ab-Nisa, 915. I'm giving you death dates because Muslims don't want you to know these dates. You've got to look at the dates. They're all too late. This is the 9th and 10th century. Everything that Muhammad said were written by these guys. Did any of them know Muhammad? Absolutely not. Did any of them see Muhammad? Absolutely not. Did any of them hear him? Absolutely not. So you can see a problem is existing already. Hold on, that's just 2 genres. We have 2 more. We have the tafsir, the commentaries on the Quran, and we have the tariq, the histories of mankind, first introduced by this guy, Al-Tabari. Folks, are you seeing the problem here? None of these guys knew Muhammad. So how did they know his life? How did they know his sayings? And how did they know what happened? And how did they know the commentaries? They don't even begin to appear for 200 to 300 years. Obviously, none of these guys knew Muhammad. They never saw him. They never heard him. I'm going to bring up one other guy. I'm going to bring up this guy, Abdul Malik, because he is the first one that introduces this character, Muhammad. He introduces it in 692 on the Dome of the Rock, there in Jerusalem, on coins and on protocols. But that's not the Muhammad we know today. That's not the Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. You will see who that Muhammad is. Hold on a minute. But the people that introduce Muhammad that we know today are these people, the Abbasids. You see the Abbasids? They only come to power in 749. Their Persian background. They take the capital away from Damascus and bring it down to what is today Baghdad. So, conclusion, Muhammad, the man, the prophet that Islam follows, was revealed 84 years after the Abbasids created him, 140 years after he was first introduced, yet 200 years after he supposedly lived. These are all too late. Are you getting that? I hope you're getting that. That's why I want to put it on a graph. Muslims don't want you to see these dates. They want you to believe that Ibn Hisham, Al-Waqidi, Al-Bukhari, Sahih, all these guys were companions of the Prophet. Not one of them was a companion of the Prophet. They lived 200 to 300 years later. Unless the Prophet lived for 200 to 300 years, they didn't know him, they didn't hear him, they didn't see him. Now let's continue. It's not only that. Look and see where they lived. So let's put on a map. There is where Muslims would like you to believe that this was all being written down and these people were all living in those 2 green circles, Mecca and Medina, in the Hijaz, the central part of Arabia. No, they're not. Take a look. Everything that was written down about Muhammad, what he did and said, was written there in Baghdad. That's 1,200 miles to the north. Ibn Hisham, who wrote down the biography, the first one to do so. He was born in Basra, grew up in Cairo, wrote in Baghdad. That's 900 to 1,200 miles too far to the north. Al-Bukhari, who wrote down, first to write down the hadith. He comes from Bukhara. That's Uzbekistan. That's 2,600 miles away. Al-Tabari, who writes the tafsir and the tahriq, the first to do so. He comes from northern Iran, Tabaristan. That's 1,700 miles away. The conclusion? None of the traditional writers lived or worked in Mecca or Medina. They were too far to the north of Mecca and came from the west and east of Baghdad. Note, all of these northern areas are where the Abbasids originated. All of these are Abbasid writers. It's an Abbasid creation. He is an Abbasid creation. Now, you might say, don't we have the same thing? No. Everything we know about Jesus Christ, about his tafsir, about his tariq, about his sira, and about his hadith. The sira of Jesus Christ is written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They were the ones that saw him live. They were the ones that were with him for the last 2 years of his life. The hadith of Jesus were those who heard what he said, and that's written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in some Bibles in red letters. So we have the same genre they have. The tafsir of Jesus would be the commentaries written by Paul, and then the tahriq would be the histories of Jesus, would be the early church. That's the book of Acts. So when you look at all those writings by Paul, Luke, Matthew, Mark, John, and all those writers who wrote the New Testament, they did their writings within 15 to 60 years of Christ's death, written in the same area that Jesus lived, not hundreds of miles to the north, but in the same area. Two of them, Matthew and John, actually knew Jesus face to face. They saw him. They heard him. Luke and Mark got it from those who knew him. Now, Islam is dependent on 200 to 300 late years of oral tradition. That's what it is, oral traditions, and hundreds of miles too far to the north. Which would you guess is more authoritative? I will go with Christianity. In fact, as a comparison, if we as Christians had to depend on the sources for Jesus compared to what Muslims are dependent on for Muhammad, Jesus would not begin to appear to the 3rd century. How would we defend him? We couldn't. I'm going to put a spanner in the ranks because I've just told you and I've just said that this life of Muhammad written by Ibn Hisham. Did you hear me say that? I told you a lie. I thought that was the case until the Germans actually corrected me on that. The book that you see there, the book that everybody uses, the book that you have to know to what Muhammad did, the Sira of Muhammad that was written, they say, by Ibn Ishaq, you can see it on the cover there, translated by Alfred Guillaume, had nothing to do with Ibn Ishaq and had nothing to do with Ibn Hisham. So who wrote that book? Who actually compiled that book? None other than this guy right here, this German scholar named Heinrich Friedrich Wüstenfeld. He was the one that went to 4 different German cities. He was an Arabist himself. He went and got scraps of paper as much as he could from 4 different libraries in 4 different German cities. And between 1858 and 1860, he compiled the Sira, taken from these libraries, and then published it in 1860. The life of Muhammad, as we know it today, comes from a German 160 years ago. The man who Muslims are dependent on to know who their prophet is or what he did is an elderly German linguist who wrote Muhammad's story 160 years ago, thus over 1,000 years too late. Now, can you see why this is a problem for 21st century scholars? Concerning these late states, they say Islam, as we know, did not exist in the 7th century, but evolved over a period of 200 to 300 years. The Quran probably was not revealed to one man in 22 years, but likely evolved over a period of 50 to 100 years. Conclusion, the history of Islam, at least from the time of the Caliph Abdul Malik from 685 to 705 and before, is a later fabrication. Now, it's going to get even worse. In a few weeks, I'm going to introduce some new research, which will prove that it wasn't the Abbasids who created Islam, but possibly the Ottomans. So, hold this space. We're now looking at all the oldest extant manuscripts. We cannot find any of them prior to the 9th century or the 10th century. In fact, most of the extant manuscripts for everything we know about Islam appear in the 1200s all the way up until the 1700s. That's the Ottoman period, and starting in the 1300s. Can you see why, folks, why we need to get this out to the world? Now, if that is a problem, let's then deal with Mecca. Mecca is an even greater problem. Mecca, here's the problem. Mecca, according to Islam, if it did not exist, remember, Islam is based on 3 things: the book, the man, and the place, the Quran, Muhammad, in Mecca. If Mecca is foundational. If you start to confront Mecca and it starts to wobble and then you're going to shut it down, the other 2 come flying with it. You have to have Mecca because Muhammad was living in Mecca. Most of the Quran was revealed in Mecca. Therefore, you have to go to Mecca. It is important for Muslims because they believe that it is the earliest and most important city in the history of mankind. In chapter 7, verse 24, when Adam and Eve are thrown out of the Garden of Eden, it's way up in space, they're thrown down to Mecca. Therefore, it had to be the oldest city in the existence of mankind. You don't get a city or a habitant earlier than Adam and Eve. They're the first humans. So, therefore, it's the oldest city in the world. Yet references to Mecca in the Quran and traditions do not hold up historically. Notice, It's not near Sodom and Gomorrah, though the Quran says it is. It's not where Abraham lived, though the Quran says it is. It's not where Ishmael and Hagar lived, though the Quran says it is. There are about 700 prophets that supposedly were died there. None of them are there. So you can see there's a real problem here. More than that, other references suggest that Mecca is filled with lush fruit, trees, grass, grains, streams. You look at the tradition, it's full of vegetation. Take a look at Mecca today. Look at that map. Look at that picture over there. And when you look at the soil of Mecca, it has been depleted for centuries, for thousands of years. In fact, there is no way any of this could have existed there. So obviously the traditions are not talking about Mecca. Ironically, though it's claimed to be the greatest city in the history, the oldest city in the history, the Quran only refers to it once in Surah chapter 48, verse 24, signifying that the authors either did not consider it that important or it only came into existence after the Quran was written. Geographically speaking, look at all the geographical places. 65 of them reference. But notice, 24 of them refer to the people of Ad, people of Thabun. Look where the people of Thabun live. 23 refer to the people of Ad. Look where the people of Ad are. 7 times the people of Midian. Look where Midian is, and now look where Mecca is way down. That's 600 miles to the north. You can't have this prophet going up and down through these people of Ad and Thabun every day, unless, of course, he had a helicopter or an airplane. I don't think they existed in the 7th century that early. Now, the Quranic Arabic, when you look at it, it was supposed that the prophets were, if you look at the Quranic Arabic, you will see that it is not the same Arabic that we have that would have been in Mecca and Medina. It's Nabatean Aramaic, which is situated 600 miles further to north. When you look at Mecca, it's what they, according to what the traditions say, between 70 and 300 prophets are buried in Mecca. Yet with all the buildings now being constructed in Mecca, requiring deep foundation, they have yet to dig up even one, proving that there's not much there at all when they dig down deep. It seems that the Saudi Arabians, realizing what's wrong because of Mecca's lack of history, are cementing up all of the evidence, suggesting even they are either skeptical of its history or they do not want the rest of the world to find out. If you look there, they have now destroyed Khadija's house. That's the first wife of Muhammad. They've destroyed now Muhammad's, where he was born and grew up. They destroyed that house, they're cementing it over, and they're building 62 skyscrapers to basically cover up the evidence because of this problem. Here's the other problem. Dr. Patricia Corona, she reads and writes 15 languages, the only one to be able to do this. She decided to write a book on Mecca and wanted to go to all the surrounding nations. So she went to the Babylonians, she went to the Persians, she went to the Assyrians, she went to the Roman Empire, she went to Sabatis and to the Himyarites, she went to the Nubians, she went to the Nabateans, she went to every empire that surrounded what would be Mecca today, and she asked one simple question, looking at all their documentation. She couldn't find one reference to Mecca in any of their documentation. Just look at all those red circles and squares. Those are all the surrounding nations. How come they had never heard of this place at all? And yet it's the oldest city in the history of mankind. Now, let's look at some smaller cities that are around Mecca. There you can see Mecca on that map I put there in the green star. Look at all these red stars. Maghrib, Sana, Najr, Taif, Yathrib, Khaybar, Petra, Mamre. These are all smaller, much smaller inhabitants, and yet every one of them are listed in. We have references in Greek writings, we have references in Roman writings, we have references in Zoroastrian writings, Persian writings, to all these places. Even the Nubians knew about them, but not one of them knew about Mecca. Yet all these other more insignificant places are well known. When you look at the trade route, and you look on the trade route, you can see it there on that map. I've just put a topographical map. Take a look where the trade route is, and it answers the question why Mecca is not on that. It's not on the trade route. Look and see. If you start from Yeda in the south, go to Sana, Najr, Taif, Yathrib, Khaybar, Petra, and Mamre, it all follows on the Western Plateau. You can see the Western Plateau in the topographical picture at the bottom. Notice where Mecca is. Mecca is 3,000 feet off the plateau. That's why no one had heard of Mecca. It did not exist. It was not even on the trade route. More than that, Mecca before 741, which is considered the earliest documentary evidence for it anywhere. The first document that even mentions it is in 741. Muhammad supposedly died in 632. That's over 100 years later. But it has no history, and even that reference is located in southern Turkey, which is way too far north. It's over 1,200 miles to the north. Ptolemy, the second century geography, who wrote the Arabian geography, he never listed Mecca, everything else but Mecca. And listen, folks, if that is the case, he's not on any map at all until 900. Neither the land trade route along the Arabian Western Plateau nor the Red Sea trade route along the East African coast supports an early Mecca, proving that none of the trade went via Mecca at all, confronting the notion that it was at the center of trade. Now, a possible reason is wasn't known was because it's in the desert. Just take a look at that map. Notice that? Look at where Mecca is, and you'll see Mecca is in the middle of a map, and the reason why is because if it's a desert, if it is in a desert, it has no water. If you have no water, you have no people, no towns, no cities, no cities, no civilization, no history. You need water to have history, and there's just no water that far south. That's why you can't have a history. You can't have it going back that far. So what do they do today? Even today, the only way that Mecca exists is thanks God to the Americans and the Europeans are 27 desalination plants, which desalinate the water from the Red Sea and then pump it in all the way there to Mecca to be able to give the 1 billion believers that come at some point in their lifetime that inexhaustible water that they credit to God. Has nothing to do with Allah. It has to do with Bechtel Corporation, United States. Thank you. Because of Mecca's water problem, Queen Zubaydah built an aqueduct in 801, the 9th century, which then had to be refurbished 9 times in the subsequent 974 years due to overbearing need for potable water, and then was finally replaced by desalination plants from the Americans in 1926. Now you can understand why no mosque had a Qibla facing Mecca until the 8th century. Muslims have no idea why all the Qiblas up until the 8th century are all facing Petra. Every Qibla, that's the direction of prayer for those mosques. Not one is facing Mecca until 750. That's the 8th century. The added seasons for the Meccan pilgrimage make more sense for Jerusalem than they do to Petra, as they are not only earlier, but they use many of the same functions. Conclusion: certainly someone, somewhere, at some time should have known about this city, yet no one, anywhere, nor at any time, proving that it never existed at the time of Muhammad, nor during early Islam. If Mecca did not exist, then what are we going to do with Muhammad in the Quran? Let's go to the Muhammad. Because if you need to have Mecca, the city, for this man Muhammad. So what are we going to do with Muhammad? Well, why don't we just do like we did with Mecca? Let's just follow the evidence. Here's what they claim. Muslims claim that Muhammad was the last and greatest prophet, born in Mecca in 570, died in Medina in 632. He modeled Islam as a paradigm for the world. He received the Quran as the final revelation. Everything we need to know about him we can find in the Sira of Ibn Hisham and the hadith of Al-Bukhari. Unfortunately, these references are all in the 9th century, 200 years after the fact. So he is he referred to in the 7th century? That's what we're asking, in the time period he supposedly lived. If so, what do we need? We have to go back to the 7th century, but nothing exists, not from any Islamic sources. So let's go to what does exist. Let's go to the coins. Let's go to the rock inscriptions. They don't disintegrate, they don't deteriorate. Let's start with the coins. The Lydians were the ones to introduce the coins in 600 BC. Coins were used for more than just commerce. Coins created and maintained a ruler's identity. They didn't have TV or internet or newspapers or radio, and so when anybody came to power, they minted coins. That's how they would introduce themselves, because everybody got it in their hands. Since everyone had to use them, a ruler knew that the best way to introduce himself to the whole realm was to mint coins. So what was on a coin? Well, first of all, they put the name of the ruler, and then they would also put the name of the religion. So that's why they would always say, if they were a Christian, they'd have a cross. If they were if they were a ruler from Zoroastrian, they'd have a fire altar. They would also put then the date to place them into a time period, often beginning with the ruler's date of that when he came to power. And then they would put the name of the mint, permitting us to follow their chronology and place originally. So here's the problem that the numismatists have, those who are the experts on the coin. And I've been in contact with them with the last 4 years. They're doing the research. They have the coins. They even have bought the coins. But they're having a problem because whenever they look at the coins and read what's on the coins, they do not describe what we know from what the Islamic traditions are. So I phoned them up and I said, would you stop trying to impose the 9th and 10th century traditional narrative on these coins? Just read what the coins say. Tell me what they say. That's what any good numismatist should do. That's why I dispense with the Islamic traditions, and let's go back to the 7th century. That should be the task of any historian. That should be the task of any numismatist as well. And the numismatists lament that there doesn't seem to be any coins in the Hijaz. That's the first problem. Hold on a minute. If this is the center of the world, if this is where the caliphate for the Umayyad Caliphate was, if this is where also Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, the Rashidun period, the four great caliphs, they're there in Medina, certainly they were minting coins with their names and their places on it, right? No, not one mint whatsoever that far south. Why? Because there's no water there. No water, no people, no town, no city, no cities, no civilization, no need for coins. So where are the mints? Here's where the mints are. Notice, Tartus, Hims, Baalbek, Damascus, Tabadia, Abil, Baisan, Jeras, I'm just destroying the language, sorry, but those of you who are from Arab background, forgive me for doing that, but you know what the names are. They're all in what is today Jordan and also Syria and also Lebanon and Israel. What about the eastern mints? Susa, Dash, Arajan, Bishapur, Danbuk, Istakar, Kazaran, Darabjid, Adar Shikora, and Kavatkura. Look at, they're all in the east. They're in what is today Iran and Iraq. Why are all the mints up there? One very good reason. There's water up there. If there's water up there, you're going to have people. People need coins. Coins need mints. Therefore, possibly because the Hijaz was a desert with no water, and where there's no water, you know the rest of the story. Now, looking at the Rashidun period, look at the coins. There are coins being minted. They are in Arabic. They are from that area. But notice what they say on them. Muhammad dies, but no Islamic coins exist during his time. Not one during the whole Rashidun period. We saw nothing, no coins from 624 to 661. Not a word about Muhammad or Abu Bakr or Umar or Uthman or Ali. Isn't that curious? So what do they have? Notice, the Sassanid Empire, there are Arab coins, and they are all Christian. All the coins are Christian. Take a look at them. Here are some of those coins. Notice notice where the red squares are. Those are crosses. You only put a cross on the coin if it is a Christian. There's the front, there's the back. There's the front, there's the back. So front and back, those are the four images. Now we come to Mu'awiyah. Certainly Mu'awiyah must have been a Muslim, because Mu'awiyah is the beginning. He is the one that inaugurates the Umayyad Caliphate that goes for 100 years as a Muslim caliphate, right? He comes to power in 661, continues up to 680. Notice what his coins are, because he mints coins. He's living in Damascus. Here's the question. What's he doing in Damascus? Why is he not down in Medina like the other four caliphs, like Muhammad himself? Why is he down where Islam is beginning, or where it is? There's a reason why. There's no water there. But there is in Damascus, one of the oldest cities in history. Look at his coin. I've got that. That's my coin right there. There's a picture of Mu'awiyah. He has a cross in his hand. He has a cross above his head. He's holding a cross, folks. If he's a cross, he cannot be a Muslim. He has to be a Christian. Look at the backside. There's the letter M. There's a cross above it. Now, look at the two coins on the right. Not the ones above. Look at the ones below. The ones that look like squares. That's a coin that was minted in 663. I need to get a hold of that coin. This is the mother lode right here. There's Mu'awiyah. He has a cross on his head. He has a cross on his hand. Look at the backside of the coin. There's the letter M to show what it's worth. There's a cross above the M, but look what's written below it. MHMD. Muhammad. It's going from right to left. There's Muhammad. There's the name we're looking for. Muhammad on a Christian coin. What is Muhammad doing in 663 on a Christian coin? Ooh, I love it. Hold on. You'll see why. Now, he then introduces this inscription. This is an inscription, a famous inscription by Mu'awiyah there at the dam in Taif. And notice he writes it in Greek. And he calls, there's his name, Mu'awiyah, Abdullah, slave of God. He's writing in Arabic. He's talking in Arabic. And then he says that he is the Abdullah, the Amir al-Mu'minin, the servant of God, the commander of the believers. Ah, right. So this must be Muslim, right? No. Look at the top left-hand corner. What do you see? A cross. So who are the believers? Christians. He is the commander of the Christians. He was always a Christian from 661 all the way to 680. There's nothing Islam here. There is no word called Islam. There are no people called Muslim. We can't find any documentation for people called Muslims or a religion called Islam or a man named Muhammad who comes from the Hijaz. So now we come to Abdul Malik. Abdul Malik, he is the kingpin. Here you see a gold solidus. That's a Byzantine gold solidus. You'll see that's Heraclius with his two sons. They're holding crosses. They're good Christians. They're Monophysite Christians. On the backside is the Monophysite cross, proving that they are Christians. Now, about 691, when Abdul Malik, he's now in power in 685, he has to pay homage to the Byzantine. By this time, Justinian II is now the emperor. He has to pay homage. So what does he do? Abdul Malik mints his own coins. Look at the coin he mints. This one here. That's Heraclius with his two sons. What has he done? He's taken off the cross, and he's also he destroyed the Byzantine cross on the back. It's a mockery. This is a perversion of the coin. Justinian II gets so angry with Abdul Malik. He goes to war with Abdul Malik. Abdul Malik wins. Abdul Malik wins, defeating Justinian. So what does do? Abdul Malik immediately mints this coin. Here's the coin he mints. There's his image on the front, holding a cross. This is a victory coin, and he has, look around the outside, La ilaha illa Muhammadur Rasulullah, for there is only one God but God, and the praised one is nothing more than a messenger. Did you notice what I just said? Did you hear me say that? Muhammad Rasulullah. The praised one is the messenger of Allah. Ooh, you never heard that before, have you? You'll see why. Now, here is the coin he then introduces in 696. Now, this is the coin that is still there. This is my coin you're looking at. I bought it. It costs a lot of money. That's a gold solidus. You see the shahad in the middle. You see this is an attack. Look and see, chapter 4, verse 171 of the Quran. This is the beginning of it. He is saying, say not three, for God is one and he has no son. That's attacking Jesus. That's attacking the Trinity. That's attacking the sonship of Jesus Christ. Then on the other side it says, for God does not beget nor is he begotten. That's against the begetting. That's against John 3:16. These are all attacks against Jesus' divinity. These are mainly a Christian anti-Trinitarian attack. This is an internecine Christian squabble. This is an Arian attack which happened in the 4th century with Athanasius and Arian that is now continuing up until the 7th century. Who do you think Abdul Malik is? He is a Christian, but he's an anti-Trinitarian Christian, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses today. Folks, why are we surprised? This has been following us since the 4th century. It raises its head in the 7th century, but now it's being done by a caliph. When a caliph makes this attack, everybody pays attention because he is now the second biggest power of his day. So, there's the coins. I don't want to go into it. We then go to the early rock inscriptions. Look at the early rock inscriptions. Notice where they are in the 7th century. In the 7th century, they're all up in Jordan in the north or Yemen in the south. Why aren't they in the middle in the 7th century? Those are all 9th and 10th century that you see there on the map. The reason why is because there's no water there. Are you hearing me saying this over and over again? You have Ilke Lindsten, who's probably done the best work on the rock inscriptions. He's looking at 40,000 of them, and he's looking mainly from the time period between 640 to 740, that 100-year period, and this is what he has found. That prior to 690, there is no evidence of anything Islamic on any of the inscriptions. And then, except for formulary, everything comes after 690. From 690 to 710, suddenly now we're in the 8th century. Now you're starting to see this name Muhammad appear, possibly as a prophet, maybe something else. We'll get to that. From 710 to 720, the Muslim rites begin to appear, the pilgrimage, the prayer, the fast. Look, this is a good 100 years after Muhammad. And it's not till the 730s that the name Muslim and Islam referred to a specific group in contradistinction to Christianity. Folks, do you see what's happening here? It was only in the 730s onwards that there is evidence of popular devotion to Muhammad as a prophet and messenger, which makes the Islamic traditions incredibly awkward. Furthermore, there is a 100-year silence prior to this that indicates that Islam did not exist as a distinct religion until long after the time of Muhammad, which cast doubt on whether he had any part of it. Hold on. What about the name? Muhammad. Does it occur in Christian writings in the 7th century? Yes, it does. So now let's look at them. What's in a name? What exactly does Muhammad mean in Arabic? Folks, that's what no one's asking. Muhammad does have a meaning. It means the praised one, the blessed one, the anointed one, the Messiah. Thus, it's not a name, it's a title. It's always been a title. It was first used in Ugaritic in 1400 BC. Then it was used in our Bible. 11 times you will see Muhammad, Muhammad, Muhammad. Look at Psalm 5:16. Muhammad, the altogether lovely, referring to Solomon. It's the same word. MHMD. Arabic and Hebrew use the same root. Therefore, it's the same word in our Bible. We've been looking at all these years. We never realized that's Muhammad. Muhammad, the praised one, the altogether lovely. Uniquely, then St. Jerome in the 4th century then took this word Muhammad in Syriac and applied it to Jesus Christ. So from the 4th century on, anytime you see Muhammad on a coin, did I say that? A coin? Or on anything else, it's always Jesus Christ. By the 7th century, the Christians use Muhammad to refer to the returning Messiah, while the Jews use Muhammad to refer to the Messiah yet to come. To understand this point for the 7th century, let's look at the Quran itself and at the Dome of the Rock and try to unpack the references to Muhammad on each. When you look at the Quran, there are only 4 times. This is odd, isn't it? This Quran that's supposed to be from this greatest of all messengers refers only 4 times to Muhammad. Moses is found 136 times in the Quran. Jesus is found 93 times. Abraham 79 times. Pharaoh 74 times, suggesting that Muhammad was not a very popular word or title. In chapter 3, verse 144, and the blessed one is no more than a messenger. That could be Jesus. Chapter 33, verse 40, the blessed one is not the father of any of your men, but he is the messenger of Allah and the last of the prophets. This could refer to any prophet. Chapter 47, verse 2, and believe in that which is sent down to the Blessed One applies to all prophets. Chapter 48, verse 29, The Blessed One is the messenger of Allah, folks. Can you see? This is nothing more than a reference to Jesus Christ, the Blessed One. We know that because, take a look, if this is the prophet from Mecca at all, the Muslims cannot use the Quran to support Muhammad, the prophet's existence in the 7th century, and one of the foundational pillars of Islam begins to fall. When we go to look at the Dome of the Rock, this was created by Abd al-Malik in 691. Look and see what it says. It says all the way around. Look at the only original part that still exists today, the inner ambulatory, where those two green arrows are pointing to. That's where the inscriptions are. They're still there today. Say not three, for God is one and he has no son. That is against Jesus' divinity, against the Trinity, and against his sonship. Then you have, for there is no, God does not begetteth, nor is he begotten. That later becomes Surah 112. So this is attacking John 3:16. And then it says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. For there is only one God, and the Blessed One, or the Praised One, is the messenger of God. This is attacking Jesus' divinity, attacking the Trinity, and showing that he's nothing more than a man like you and me. Folks, if you look at the inscriptions, they're there to look at. If correct, the Muslims cannot use the Dome of the Rock to support Muhammad's existence in the 7th century either. And another foundational pillar of Islam begins to fall. So what about the references to Muhammad, the other ones? Let's take a look at them. And there are only 5 references to Muhammad in the 7th going into the 8th century. We start with Thomas the Presbyterian, 634. A battle between the Romans and the Tayyaye de Muhammad. So there's the name Muhammad, but he is from Tayyay. Who are the Tayyayes? They are from Iraq. They are the Lahmids, the Iraqis. Look and see where Iraq is. That's 1,000 miles further north. They're fighting in Gaza. The Muhammad of Islam never went to Gaza. That's way too far north. This is the Muhammad, the praised one of the Tayyay. A flyleaf in 636 says the Arabs of Muhammad. Now here is the Arabic reference to MHMD. Killed many Syrians in Yarmouk. How could the Muhammad of Islam be way up in Yarmouk, which is way up in Jordan, in Syria? That's way up to the north. He never went to Syria, way too far north. This is another Muhammad. This is a praised one of those Arabs. In 660, Sabaeus, now we're getting into the mid-7th century, he talks about an Ishmaelite called Mahmud with 12,000 Israelites attacks the Byzantine. When did 12,000 Israelites join with the Arabs to attack any Byzantine? This is just not historical. And more than that, if he's an Ishmaelite, then that would fit perfectly because all the Arabs are Ishmaelites. 690, we're now at the end of the 7th century. John Bar Bekenkaya says that Muhammad is a teacher, the leader of the Arabs. Now, this is the first real good reference, but look and see where he is. He's way up in the north. No suggestion of Islam, no suggestion that he was a Muslim. This is an Arab Muhammad. Now we come to John of Damascus, 730. We're well into the 8th century, and now he uses the word we're looking for, Muhammad. And he talks about this man who is a prophet who has looted of the Ishmaelites. He is not a Muslim. He is the Muhammad of the Ishmaelites. And this is the heresy of the Ishmaelites. And he refers to these 4 books that this prophet has. The book of the cow, that later becomes Surah 2. The book of the women, that later becomes Surah 4. The book of the table, that later becomes Surah 5. And the book of the camel, there is no surah called the camel. And there is 4 different books here, meaning the Quran was still not complete. It was only made up of 3 of what became the Quran later on, and another surah that didn't get into the Quran. So you can see, even as late as 730, this is the wrong Quran, this is the wrong Muhammad. Conclusion, every reference to Muhammad in the 7th century places him in Gaza, in Jerusalem, in Damascus, or in Hira, and that is way up all to the north, probably referred to another Muhammad known as the Praised One. Now, I don't want to get into this. Let's go right through this and let's get right into the Quran, because now, folks, now we're hitting the mother lode. This is where the rubber hits the road. Remember what Muslims claim. They all claim 4 things. That the Quran is uncreated. That's in chapter 85, verse 22. That the Quran was sent out. That's we find in Al-Bukhari Sahih, volume 6, hadith number 509 and 510. And the Quran was completed by Uthman in 652. That's also hadith number 6, volume 6, hadith number 510 and 509 of Al-Bukhari. And that the Quran is unchanged in the last 1,400 years. That's in Surah 10, verse 15. That's in Surah 18, verse 27. And that's in Surah 15, verse 9, So, if you look at that, why do they make these claims? They have to, because the Quran makes it. I've just now got done saying that. I'm just repeating myself. Surah 85, verse 21 and 22 say that it's eternal. Chapter 10, verse 15, and also chapter 18, verse 27 say that no one can change his word. And then chapter 15, verse 9 says that Allah guards it. That's why no one can change it. Not one word, not one letter can be changed. Now, we would never make that claim. Please don't make that claim about the Bible. When we know the Bible was created, we know it was not sent down, inspired by God, but not sent down. It was complete, but we don't have those originals, and it has been changed. We even say where it's been changed. So my remit today, I'm not going to critique the first uncreated and sent down because I'm not eternal. What I can do is the second two. I can create and demand, is there a complete Quran from the 7th century, from 652, that is exactly like our Quran, 114 surahs, and not one word, not one letter is changed? That's all I'm going to ask, because that's what will destroy the Quran. What do we go to find out about the Qurans? We go to Sahih Bukhari. I just got done saying that. That is 870. It's 870 that they finally make up these claims about the Quran. That's 240 years too late. Now notice, this is what al-Bukhari says. He says that Muhammad died in 632. Uthman is the one that created the first Quran in 652. And what did he do? He immediately sent it to 5 cities. Those are the 5 cities I'm putting up there on the map. You have Mecca, you have Medina, you have Basra, you have Kufa, which is today Baghdad, and you have Damascus. So 2 in Iraq, 2 in Arabia, and 1 up to Damascus, up in Syria. 5 copies, right? So that they would never be changed again. This is 652, and because of that, those 5 should still be there as originals, as the models for all the other Qurans. But hold on a minute. We then look at the tradition. The traditions say that a new copy starts to be introduced in Damascus, written by a guy who was a companion of the Prophet named Ubay ibn Ka'b. It has 116 surahs. Hold on, there's supposed to be 114. So it's not the same Quran. And another then is introduced in Baghdad that was written by Ibn Mas'ud. It only has 110 surahs. There's supposed to be 114. That's 4 less than the Quran we have today. And then a third one is introduced in Basra by a guy named Ibn Musa. It has 15,000 differences with the Quran we have today, the one that was put together by Zayd ibn Thabit, the secretary of Muhammad, according to their traditions. This is not my story. This is their story. So here's the question. All note that there was at least 5 Qurans in the 7th century from Medina, Mecca, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. We do not even have one of them today. Not one of them. But something happened. Hold on. How is it we don't even have one of them? That's only 1,400 years ago. You can go to London, you can go to Rome, and you have the Sinaiticus and the Alexandrinus there in London. You have the Vaticanus there in Rome. These are entire New Testaments from the 4th and 5th century. That is 200 to 300 years before the Quran. How is it we can reproduce the entire New Testament in 3 different manuscripts, and they can't even come up with one Quran that were preserved in 5 cities? Not one. And that's only 1,400 years ago. Do you see a problem here? Now, here's the thing. In the 8th century, something began to happen. The historical overview of where the qira'at came. These are when the qira'at were starting to be introduced. You might say, what am I talking about? Hold on. The Arabic which is used in the Quran today does not come from the Hijaz. It comes from that which is in Mecca, Medina. It comes from much further north. It comes from Nabatea. The Arabic was Nabatean Aramaic. Today's current Arabic has 28 letters. But back then, Nabatean Arabic only had 16 consonantal letters. It did not have any dots. It did not have any vowels, like today's does. Obviously, this caused a problem in understanding what was being written. They couldn't read it. A single consonantal letter could be pronounced 5 to 8 different ways, depending on where you put the dots and the vowels. But remember, these dots and vowels did not exist in the 7th century. Thus, in the 8th century, dots and vowels had to be created and added to the script to help Muslims read the text. So here, these are 2 manuscripts. I have them right here. This one, I have them right here in my office. There's the Samarkand on the left. There's the Sana manuscript. Notice there are no dots and vowels. Do you see any dots above and below the lines? Do you see any fatha, kasr, or dama? You don't see any of them on either of those. The earliest manuscripts did not have dots and vowels. These are from the 8th century. Even in the 8th century, they still didn't have it. What am I talking about? Well, here are the 28 letters today. But the aleph, the kaf, the lam, the mim, the ha, and the waw, those don't need dots. All the other 22 letters need dots. So if you have just one smiley face, which most letters are made up of, you put 1 dot it's a N, 2 dots it's a T, 3 dots it's a TH, 1 dot below it's a B, 2 dots it's a ya. Now you get 5 different letters with 5 different dots. Now suddenly people can read it, but you still have a problem with the vowelization. You put 1 curlicue above it, it's a dhamma. A slash above it, it's a kasra. That's the u sound, the e sound, and then finally the ah sound, the fatha. You need those 3 vowels. None of those vowels existed in the 7th century. They had to be introduced in the 8th and 9th century. If you took 3 smiley faces and you just put and changed the dots and vowels and the vowels, you can get 19 different words depending where you put your dots and vowels. That's why somebody needed to start adding dots and vowels to the text. So they did. And people all over that part of the world start putting their dots and their vowels where they wanted to, but no one had any control over them. It became so superfluous that by the 10th century, by 930s, the caliph at that time went to this guy here, Ibn Mujahid, and he said, there are about 700 Qurans that existed at that time. All of them were different. And he asked Ibn Mujahid to choose 7. So he chose Nafi from Medina, Ibn Kathir from Mecca, Abu Amir from Basra, Ibn Amir from Damascus, Asim from Kufa, Hamza from Kufa, and Al-Kisai from Kufa. Now look at their dates. Look at the dates. Look when they died. 785, 735, 738, 770, 736, 745, 772, 805. Muslims don't want you to know those dates because Muslims will say these were all companions of the Prophet. They are the first 7 that heard the Prophet recite it, and they wrote it in their different dialects. No, they did not. None of them even lived at the time of Muhammad. They were living in the 8th century and the 9th century. They were too far away. But hold on a minute. This is the Quran that everybody uses today. I have it in my hand. I don't know if you can see it. This is the Hafs Quran. This is not in that list. What about this Quran? 93% of the Muslim world today memorizes this Quran. Hafs an Asim. He's not in that list. So obviously this became a problem. By the 12th century, they needed to choose some more. So Al-Shatibi was then given the responsibility to choose 2 students from every one of those 7, and he came up with these 14. Notice there's Hafs. Do you see Hafs there? Over there, he is from the Asim ibn Jad. He is from Kufa. Look when he died, 796. This is the Quran that we use today. This is his Quran. So now another 14 were chosen. On top of the 7, that now makes 21 different Qurans, 21 different Arabic Qurans. Look at the dates. They're all in the 8th and 9th, and most of these are in the 9th century. Well, that still wasn't good enough because Al-Jazari then was given responsibility in the 15th century. This is 800 years after Muhammad to choose another 9, 3 qira'ats and 6 transmitters, 3 riwayats. Folks, by the time he chooses it, there are now 30. 7 plus 21 plus 9 equals 30. 30 different Qurans, completely different Qurans. How many of you heard what I'm just saying? This is the first time you've heard it, right? Take a look at these 2 here. These are the 2 most popular. I've got here Hafs on this side, and I've got Warsh on this side. These are 2 of the most popular ones used today. Guess how many differences there are between these 2? 5,000 different words, which means 5,000 different meanings, 5,000 different meanings, different theology, different doctrines, and yes, even different practices. You can get them today. So let's look at Hafs. Hafs there, compared to the other 29. Since he was the one that was chosen 100 years ago, how many differences there are between this guy and all the other 29? 93,000 different words. So where's this idea that there's one Quran? Not one letter, not one word change. 93,000 different words. 93,000 different. We took it down to Speaker's Corner, held 26 of these Qurans up back in 2016. This was the first time the world had seen it. That's Hatun there with the dark glass, the glass at the bottom there in the blue sweater. She was the one that found these. She found them all over in Jordan, in Yemen. You can buy them today. Up here behind me, I have 7 of them. Another 2 here. I have 9 of them right here in my office. No 2 are alike. Now look at the guy that's over on the right there. That's Muhammad Hijab, one of the biggest names on the internet today. He was there. He saw what was happening. He told all the people, don't look at what they're showing you. Don't listen to what they're saying. Come to me. I'll explain it. Well, obviously, he didn't know how to explain because you can just see, I'm not going to go through these guys. I don't have time. Just look at the difference between the Hafs and the Warsh. Hafs and the Warsh fought versus were killed on the left. Here you have Ibadu, which is slave, versus in the present self. Completely different words. Doing good, isanan, versus husnan, beauty. I'll just look at this one right here. Bariyati versus bariati in chapter 98. Indeed, they who disbelieved among the people of the scripture, that's us Christians and the polytheists, will be in the fire of hell, abiding eternally therein. Those are the worst of creatures. That's according to Hafs. Look at worse. We are the worst of the innocent. Now hold on. As Christians, are we the worst creatures or are we innocent? And if we're innocent as Christians and Jews and polytheists, what are we doing in hell? There's all kinds of theological problems with that. So it does change the meaning. It does change the word. Now, of course, Muhammad Hijab had a problem. He didn't know what to do. So he went to this man, Yasser Qadi, in 2020, in June 8th, and he didn't know we were listening. He asked him, and he put out his hand. He says, listen, which Quran is the one that's in heaven? Which is the one that was given to Muhammad? Which is the one that was written by Uthman? Yasser Qadi, the world's leading scholar on the qira'at, did his doctorate at Yale University on this subject, said, do not ask me this question. We do not talk about it. This is the most difficult topic for scholars. You don't tell new converts of Islam about the qira'at. Only with the most advanced do you do a deep dive. Scholars, he said, in the past 1,000 years have not solved the qira'at problem. Muslims have a respect for the Quran, he said. We put a red line beyond which we don't go. Unlike here in the West, where there are no red lines, you can ask anything you want. And then he turned to Muhammad Hijab and says, your standard narrative has holes in it. The standard Islamic narrative. Where do you think we get sin from? Sin. sin. Sin has holes in it, folks, and we are exposing those holes. Western academics, he says, have jumped leaps and bounds on this issue in the last 100 years. They look at the rest of us Muslims like the emperor with no clothes. He says, I've never lectured on this subject, nor will I ever do that, except in my class. This should not ever be brought up in public. He said, turn off the camera. Don't ask me to say what should be written on the blank mushaf. When again asked, finally, after 28 minutes, he said, you've got to give me an answer. Which is the Quran that's in heaven? Is it the Hafs? Is it the Wash? Is it the Qalun? Is it the Kasai? Is it the Ibn Kathir? Which is the one? And he finally says, okay. They are all the Quran. You take a little bit of Hafs, you take a little bit of Wash, you mix them up, and that's the Quran we have today. Folks, within 2 weeks, all the comments, there were hundreds and hundreds of comments on YouTube on both of their sites, and they were saying, I have left Islam, I'm no longer a Muslim because of what you said. You're the ones that have told us that there's not one word, not one letter, that the Quran has always been preserved, that it is eternal, and now you're saying that there are not only hundreds, there are thousands of differences between the Qurans. Within 2 weeks, they had to shut down all of the comments on their 2 channels. Within 2 months, by August of 2020, they had to delete it off of their channels. But I've got it. David Wood's got it. You can get it. I can give it to you. Folks, we still have it, and every June 8th of every year, I bring it up and let the whole world know what's going on. Now, that's the problem with the qira'at, the dots and the vowels. The manuscript is even greater. What about the manuscripts? There are only 6 manuscripts. I went and I did a debate on this in 2014, 10 years ago. Over 1 million people have watched that debate. Hundreds have come to the Lord because of this debate. Why? Because you need to look at the earliest manuscripts. Notice, there are no dots and vowels. That's the top copy. I've got it right here. Here, you can see it. This is the top copy that I'm showing you right now. I've got it. I've got the entire top copy. It's almost priceless. It's hard to find anymore. But notice, it is the best they have. It's 99% of the Quran. It has 2,270 manuscript variants. That means words that are different in that book than in the Quran I have in my hand today. Folks, you'll see it's not the same Quran. But that's the best they've got. It is dated to the mid-8th century. Most now are saying it could go up until the 9th century. The one on the right is a Samarkand. It only goes up to 043. It is full of grammatical errors. People don't want to use it today because even in the 43 surahs it does contain, 16 of them don't even exist. There's only one complete surah, and the others have grammatical mistakes. Whoever wrote that Quran didn't know Arabic very well. The Ma'al Quran is there in London, England. It is what they call a Ma'al because it's slanted to the right. It is an older Quran. It's dated to the late 8th century. It only goes up to Surah 43. It only has half the Quran. The one on the right is the Petropolitanus in Paris, the Bibliothèque Nationale. It is only 22% of the Quran. It has 93 manuscript variants within those 22 chapters. 22%. The Al-Husayni one on the left is the monumental text. This is a 9th century Quran. That one has hundreds of coverings to censor, so that it standardizes the text to the Quran that we have today. The one on the right is the most exciting. That's the latest one that was discovered in 1975. That's the Sana manuscript in Yemen. If you look on the right-hand side, that yellow mark there, the top part down to the yellow mark is chapter 19. From the going below the yellow mark is chapter 22. What happened to chapter 20, 21? You need to go on the left side of the page. There, 20 begins. And what's interesting, between those 2 pages is about 60 to 7 years. On the right side, that has been dated to 705. On the left side, to the late 8th century. Look at all those orange marks. Every time you see an orange mark, that's a manuscript variant. That has 1,000 manuscript variants from the Quran we have today. These are not the same Quran. So in summary, what do we know about the 6 earliest manuscripts? None of them are from the 7th century. None of them are complete. None of them completely agree with each other. None of them completely agree with the current 1924 Hafs text. All of them have hundreds and even thousands of subsequent manuscript variants. So when was it complete? Could we have really discovered the oldest example? Now, they thought they found it, and I was with you, Larry, when this was found. We were there in France together. I don't know if you remember it. This Birmingham folios. And immediately people were saying, this is the oldest Quran dated from 568 to 645. That's the time period that Muhammad lived. We finally found the entire Quran. Folks, it's only front and back of 2 pages, and it includes bits and pieces of chapter 18, 19, and 20 of the Quran. It's only 63 verses. There are 6,230 verses in the Quran, and there are 343 verses in just those 3 chapters. It's not a full Quran. But look at what it says. It's chapter 18, verse 17 is the 7 sleepers of Ephesus. This is from 521, this is a folk tale. Then you have chapter 1990 to 91 is a Syriac Christian and rabbinic apocryphal account written in 145 AD, and then repeated in the pseudo-gospel of Matthew in 600 AD. And then you have chapter 20, verse 1 to 40 is the story of Moses. That comes from the Old Testament. Folks, what does that tell us? These folios are pre-Quranic, pre-Muhammad, and thus pre-Islamic, written by Christian Jews and secular Arabs in Arabic because they were writing in Arabic, and then simply borrowed and later Muslims for their own revelation put into the Quran. If you're going to borrow, which most of the Quran is borrowed, you have to borrow from that which comes earlier. And this is an example of what that comes earlier. But this is pagan, Christian, and Jewish writings. Now, we get to Dan Brubaker. We get to this is the material that's really hurt of the Muslims. He has gone back to the 10 earliest manuscripts, the 6 that I showed you, and 4 others that come later, and he's filmed them, took pictures of them, and looking at just the consonantal text. He's not looking at the dots. There were no dots, no vowels at this early. And notice what he found. He found hundreds of insertions. He found hundreds of erasures where they've erased it. Why did they erase it? Well, what's left behind now supports the Hafs text. He found hundreds of erasures overwritten where they erased and they overwrote it. Why did they write over it? It now supports the Hafs text. Overwriting without erase, entire lines. Look, there's 2 lines that have completely been written over top. Why? Because they now support the Hafs text. And then selective coverings. Look at these coverings. Look at the middle one. There are 8 different coverings where they're just censoring. This is mostly from the Husseini manuscript. Why are they censoring? So that it now supports the Hafs and Asim text, the one that's used today by all Muslims. Here's selective coverings overwritten. Again, what's left behind, including these tapings, now supports the Hafs text. So when was the Quran was it finally chosen? In 1924, 100 years ago. Because of these 30 different Qurans, there in Cairo, in Egypt, they could not have standardized tests. So they went to this guy, Muhammad al-Hizani al-Azad, and he said, could you give us one Quran? Choose one. And he chose the Hafs and Asim. He chose it in Cairo, just for the city of Cairo. They took the other 29 and they dumped into the Nile River, thinking that would get rid of them. Little did they know that my colleague Hatun Tash was able to find 26 of them. By 2016, we found all 30 by now. In 1936, there were so many problems with the Hafs and Asim, they had to revise it 7 times. They finally came out with the Farouk edition in 1936. That became the edition that was used all over Egypt. That was so successful that in 1985, the Saudi Arabian government made the Hafs and Asim text, the Fad edition, in 1985. I don't know how many of you who are listening were born in 1985. I was around, which makes me older than the canonized Quran. Makes you older too, Larry. I hope that doesn't make you feel too old. Now, what about what the Quran is made up of? Well, when you look at the Quran, it has got beautiful poetry in it. This guy, Gunther Luding, is a good friend of mine. Back in the 1970s, he did his PhD thesis on the gorgeous poetry that's in the Quran. And what he noticed is that he'd heard it before. So he took off all the dots and he took off all the vowels, remember the 5 dots and the 3 vowels, and replaced it with Syriac dots and Syriac vowels. He was able to reproduce these poems and found out that these poems were Christian hymns written in Syriac in the 5th and 6th century. He got the Eximum Opus, the highest grade you can get in Germany, which should have given him a professorship in any of the universities. He was thrown out of the university system because this was so controversial. He went into obscurity, went on to welfare. I met him in the late 1990s. I asked him for his thesis. It was in German. The first sentence was 400 words long. I said, I'll take it back to London. We translated it into English, and I have it right over here in English. Here it is. This is the English. There's the first version. It's gone. We have pushed it so much. It's now been, so many people have bought it. You can get it in the English language. A challenge to Islam for Reformation. But he now was resurrected from obscurity because of the translation in English, and he died a happy man in 2014. Because of that, Christoph Luxemburg decided to go one step further. If you look at the Quran, about 25% of the Quran no one understands. Even the scholars don't understand. It just makes no sense. A quarter of the Quran doesn't make sense. So he decided to do what Christoph Luxemburg did. He decided, as a Syro-Aramaic scholar, he decided to do 7 things. He went through 7 layers. He first looked at the 10th century tafsir, couldn't find any reference to it. He went then to the Lisan al-Arab, the Arab dictionary, couldn't find any help there. He went to homonymous, synonymous roots. In Aramaic, then suddenly these things started to come to light. He then tried different diacritics, took off the Arabic diacritics and put Syriac diacritics, checked for Aramaic roots with different diacritics, then retranslated the Arabic word back into the Aramaic, and then tried to find the lost meanings of the Arab words using 10th century Syro-Aramaic lexicon, and guess what he was able to do? He was able to reproduce the entire 25% of the Quran that no one could understand. But guess what he found? By going back to its Aramaic roots, All the dark passages were Christian lectionaries, Christian homilies, and Christian hymns. Every lectionary, homily, and hymn was about Jesus Christ. It was all about Jesus. Jesus is all through the Quran, and all the most beautiful parts of the Quran, much of it written by Saint Ephrem in the 4th century. It had nothing to do with what they found, but who they found. Now, and I'm just going to end with this. There were 7 textual evolutions. The 7th century, the Aramaic text was transposed into Arabic, but few who knew Arabic knew Aramaic, so they didn't know what they were dealing with. That's why in the 8th and 9th century, the Arabic manuscripts then had to be added with the dots and vowels. But they didn't go back to the original Aramaic to know what they were writing. That's why there's so many dots and vowels. That's why they had 700 different Qurans, and that's why the 30 had to be changed, be chosen between the 8th and the 10th century. The qira'at, the ahruf start to appear. Between the 10th and the 15th century, they then had the 7 plus 14 plus the 9 reading, which then by the 20th century had to be reversed back down to just one Quran. That's 5 different canonizations of the Quran in 5 over the last 1,400 years, folks. Now, remember the 4 claims that I started with. Those 4 claims, eternal, sent down, complete, and unchanged, we've shut them down today. Have you noticed that? You can't make those 4 claims about the Quran anymore. Neither can we about the Bible. But hold on a minute. The Bible's not the only word of God. Notice, let's apply those 4 claims to Jesus. Jesus is also the word of God, the Logos, right? Who took on human form and dwelt among us. Is Jesus eternal? Bingo, yes he is. Was he sent down? Bingo, yes he was. Is he complete? Absolutely. Has he never changed? He's never changed. Folks, the 4 criteria Muslims are looking for in their Quran, their primary revelation, we already have in Jesus Christ, our primary revelation. Conclusion, let's bring them home to a much greater and a much better revelation, Jesus Christ. A better place, and a better book, and a better man. Back to you, Larry.
Wow. Jay, that's really impressive. First of all, 2 levels. One is you've demolished, if I'm to summarize, the book, The Place of the Man, the history of the 3. Secondly, because you worked through that material like an auctioneer. That is very, very impressive. And the information that your team has put together, I just applaud them. It really is remarkable stuff. I mean, that just is utterly corrosive to the Islamic tradition, to their foundations of their religion, utterly.
Let me ask you a question. Everything I said, now you just watched it, right? You didn't sit there and you didn't interrupt me, you didn't try to come in, but you just watch. Did you understand everything I said?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, do I remember it all? The answer
No,
is
but did you understand it?
But yes, it's your desire to put something together that a layman can understand. You've achieved that, and I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, and this is what I did. Remember when I said I did this first back in September in front of 2,000 people who didn't even know me from diddly squat. They were so excited by what they had seen that they asked if we could redo it again in November. I went back in November, and this time I did it over 4 hours because they wanted me to slow down. And about 1,000 people signed up. At the end of that 4 hours, I went and I said, okay, I'm going to ask you a question, the same question I just asked you, Larry. How many of you understood every word I said? And about 90% raised their hands. Then I asked them the second question. How many of you can reproduce what I've just said if I gave you the PowerPoint and you had time to digest it? And about 60 to 70% raised their hand. And so I said, okay, why is it? How is it you understood everything? And this is what they said. First of all, it's visual. You notice I just put maps, I put timelines, I put coins, I put inscriptions, I put manuscripts. It's all visual. You don't have to really make the argument. Secondly, and this is most important, you don't have to know a word of Arabic to understand what I've just said. That's the thing that puts most people off. Thirdly, you notice I have not said anything against Muhammad. I've said nothing against Islam or nothing against the Quran. I've not said anything that's hateful or Islamophobic. They said this is the easiest stuff to use because no one's going to kill us for it. We're not going to be thrown. I don't get any strikes on YouTube for putting this stuff up there. Not one. Not since the last 4 years because it's so neutral. But here, and I'm going to end with this. Here's the most important thing, Larry. It is neutral. Anybody can use it, but I don't want everybody to use this. I don't want atheists to use it. I don't want humanists to use it. I don't want them to use it because they have nothing to replace it with. See, all they're interested in is destroying the book, the man, the place. They want to destroy the book, the Quran. They want to destroy Muhammad, and they want to destroy the place. I am not interested in destroying the book and the man and the place unless I replace them with a better book, a better man, and a better place. And we are the only one that have a better book, the Bible. We don't have these problems. See, all of these, you notice I've used redacted criticism today. I've used form criticism. I've used source criticism. I've used textual criticism. You notice that's what I've been using today. These are all the criticisms that were applied against the Bible since the 1800s, starting with the Germans. We didn't create these criticisms, but we matured them on the Bible and on the person of Jesus Christ and on his historicity. And we've had 100 years to do that. I'm taking these same criticisms that have already been applied to me and to my Lord and to my scriptures, and I'm saying, since we're the only ones that have passed the test, we are the best not only placed to use them, but we are also the best ones because we can say, forget this book, and come back to this book. So forget this book. We pretty much destroyed this book. But listen, here's a better book, a bigger book. You notice I always keep it bigger, Larry, for that reason. This is a much bigger book. Forget the man behind this book, Muhammad, and come on back to a better man, Jesus Christ. Forget Mecca, which only is mentioned once in this book, and come back to Jerusalem. Folks, coming and going, we are the only ones that have a revelation and a scripture and a person and a God. Forget Allah and come back to Yahweh. In every case, we are the only ones that have the antidote. We are the only ones that have an answer. That's why I want Christians to use this. I want you to use it. And anybody watching, I want you Christians to use it because, folks, please don't lose these Muslims to the atheists. I don't want to lose them. They already have a faith in God. I love these guys. I love these gals. These are my favorite people. Why have I dedicated 42 years of my life to bring them home? I want to bring them home, but I want to bring them home to Jesus. I want to bring them back to the gospel. I want to bring them home to the Bible, and I want to bring them home to Yahweh. So, folks, this is really the polemic, and it's also our apologetic. It's both a polemic and apologetic, both taking them from the Quran back to the Bible, from Allah back to Yahweh, from Isa back to Yeshua. Folks, let's bring them home.
Yeah, we're not interested in creating secularists. There are already enough of those. We have no desire to do that. And, you remind me of a quotation that, comes to memory here. It's, maybe 50 years ago, Will Durant, his major, 11-volume history of civilization, his volume on Jesus, he says this. He's speaking of the Bible. He says, if the higher critics were to apply the same test of authenticity to other historical figures as they have done to the Bible, like Muhammad, Alexander the Great, numerous others that he mentions, he says they would fade into oblivion. They would simply cease to exist. And that's actually what you've done here. So, Jay, brother, I appreciate you. I appreciate your ministry. I appreciate what you've done.
Okay. Well, listen, Larry, we're working together. We're joined at the hip, as we say. And listen, anytime you want to come and we want to go back and get up on those ladders at Speaker's Corner, I'm going to be there this summer. We'd love to have you there.
I'd be glad to do it, Jay. Pleasure to have you on Ideas Have Consequences. Thank you for joining me on this particular episode. My name is Larry Alex Taunton. We'll see you again on the next one.